What is up, everyone? Movie We're back again with another collab video, and we've got Andy back on the channel again today. You might have seen him a few times on the channel. This is the fourth time he's been on, and we've also got a newcomer here today called Aiden, who's wanted to come on the channel, and his favourite genre is horror movies, I believe. So, just thought we'd do a nice little collab today, just a nice little Halloween special, talking some of our favourite horror films. We've all picked 4 horror films each. And you know the score if you've seen our collabs before, mine and Andy's. We just talk about the film and what we like about it, for about 5 minutes each or whatever. So we've all picked 4 horror movies each that we think you should watch, maybe this Halloween, or just watch as a horror genre film in general. So how are you, lads? Andy, how are you doing? Been a while since you've been on.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. Refreshing from my holiday, so I'm all good. Thanks very much.
Is right, mate. Good. How are you, Aiden? Okay?
I'm fine. In need of a trim, but apart from that, I'm pretty sound.
Oh, it is, mate. Good stuff. All right, so what would you say this is one of your favourite genres, Andy? Horror?
No, I wouldn't say that. However, what I will say is, because it's such a broad term, I will say that these all the ones we picked are great films. But in general, no, horror, I have issues with the fact that sometimes they don't have great actors and great stories in. But don't get me wrong, when it's done right, it is some of the best best films you can make.
Yeah, I think we've picked some of the best of the genres. Yeah. But what about you, Ian? Is this your favourite genre? Would you say?
I'd say so. Yeah. Just on the fact that there's so many subgenres out there. Like, I know I can go into a horror movie and expect the sort of quality that I get from like a big summer blockbuster as well. For me, I could have done about 10 of these. I was limited to 4, but I could have easily gone further out of that spectrum into these sort of like slashes, your horror comedies, into stuff like that. But the 4 I feel I've picked are all different sort of genres anyway, so that should be playing into itself. So hopefully it's all right for you.
Yeah, it will be. I'm sure it will. Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of subgenres, isn't there? You've got zombie films, you've got horror comedies, of course, but I think some of the ones we picked here are mainly pure horror. Well, the ones that I have anyway. But it's kind of hard to remember all of them. But these are, for me, some of the best horrors out there. So we'll just start with the first horror movie that I think is very, very fitting. And this is one of my picks. And obviously, it's Halloween. Why not? Because it is Halloween, of course, and that's why we're doing it. And I don't know if you guys think this. Some people think it might be Psycho or whatever, or Black Christmas. But I think this sort of started the craze of another subgenre called slasher movies. Michael Myers is really the first one who donned the mask, really, and got so many sequels like we have with other slasher movies out there. Don't think this was done on a massive budget either. I think they just found this William Shatner mask in this Halloween costume shop and decided to spray paint it white and put it on him. And it's just it's a classic. It's everything you want in a slasher movie. Some people say it's not a slasher movie and it just started the slasher movies because it wasn't intended to go that way. I disagree. I do think it is actually a slasher film myself, but it's just got a brilliant score and everything. It's just a fantastic classic movie to watch, I feel. So what are your thoughts on Halloween? Do you want to go first on this one? I've got a bit more to say, but I'll just see what you guys think of this one. Do you want to go first, Andy?
Yeah, go on, sure, mate. Yeah, Halloween. It is, the ultimate, the ultimate Halloween film in some senses. Obviously, with it being the name, but no, it's a fantastic film. This is what I'm talking about. When horror's done right, this is the highbrow version of it. Obviously, 1917 John Carpenter's film. John Carpenter's a great director himself. There's other genres other than horror. He's done them very well. But I would say this one is it's the whole theme of it is Michael Myers is this unstoppable killing machine, and that'll be quite a theme as we go through different horror films. But it's just got everything. Obviously, you've got that teenage element, and obviously when you first watch this film, generally you are probably in your teeny years, so it's sort of something you can relate to. It's scary, and basically it's an unstoppable man with a knife coming to get you. And though they don't do it as much in this film, I think Rob Zombie did it a bit better in his film, the backstory of Michael Myers. I think the backstory is something that makes you want to see more of the series, I think. And I think it just gives you enough where you can sort of get to know the character and his motives and go from there. And obviously, Jamie Lee Curtis being, the queen of the slasher films as well.
Yeah, she is like one of the best final girls, isn't she? I mean, when you think of final girls or scream queens, Laurie Strode is usually near the top of the list. And it's done so many sequels, hasn't it? You know, just I think there's about 13 films altogether now. We've got another one coming next year,
Yeah.
Halloween Kills, which we released the trailer for yesterday. But for me, this is still the best one, the original for me. It's just so simple but so effective, and you know, top it off that John Carpenter score as well. It's just absolutely memorable. You can never forget it, and I just think it's fantastic. So, Aiden, are you a fan of this movie? Got any thoughts on it?
I am. Out of the, we'll call it the big four of, your slasher villains, your Jason, Michael Myers, Leatherface, and Krueger. I'd say Halloween 1. Out of all of the other first iterations of the other movies, this is probably the best one. I'm trying to think. Oh, because of all the sequels that it spanned out, does this one sort of lose its spark a little bit? Just because of, you look at the timeline for all of these movies and it branches out so much. Like, if you could watch the Rob Zombie version of this and it be a totally different timeline to the John Carpenter one. That being said, though, if you go into this not thinking of anything like that, you've got a pretty great slasher movie. It coined the term final girl with Jamie Lee Curtis, and obviously, it's got some of the most memorable kills in slasher history, as well as coining on John Carpenter into being one of the best horror movie directors that there is, making movies like The Thing and The Fog, They Live as well, just to name a few. So I think, with the budget they had and the sort of scale that it coined on afterwards, then you can't look no further than Halloween.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just think that was a really good way of putting it, to be honest, but it is one of them as well. You just think back the budget that this had and to come up with this. It is fantastic. But, well, I think that's just a nice simple one to start off with and get the podcast going, or the video, or whatever you want to call it. So we all had our say on Halloween there. I mean, I'm watching it tomorrow myself. Watch it virtually every Halloween, like a lot of other people. Just so fitting, isn't it? But is this one you technically watch on Halloween, or?
Yeah, I watch it regularly on Halloween. Yeah, that and The Exorcist mostly.
Not this year. Not this year for me. I've been doing me one horror movie a day for October, and I said I'm not going to put any of the big four slasher villains into that list. Did watch some other slashers like The Burning. I don't know if you've heard of that one. I stuck that one in the list just as a first time viewing, but not this year. I usually would, though. It'd usually be around it today or tomorrow. I'd stick it on.
Sound, no worries. Okay, so should we move on to the next one then? That was Halloween, the classic that everyone knows from John Carpenter. So do you want to go next, Andy? Would you like to go next with one?
Yeah, sure, mate. I'm gonna go with one of my picks, which is the 1968 Roman Polanski film, Rosemary's Baby. Now, obviously, we'll move on from Roman Polanski quite quickly, obviously, due to his past. It was a year before the Sharon Tate murders as well, which obviously is an entirely different conversation, but we'll move on from that. But no, Rosemary's Baby, 1968. It's, I'd say it's just before The Exorcist in terms of an occult film. I wouldn't say it's probably the first. I think there's one or two before it, but this in terms of that occult, and people have got to view it in a different way than we do now. It's obviously back then, in the 60s, religion was much more prevalent here in America, whereas now if you view it with these eyes, it's not quite as scary. But basically, it's a story of a young couple who move into an apartment next door to these seemingly lovely people, and she basically has this nightmare, and she ends up getting pregnant. And obviously the baby turns out to be the spawn of Satan, and it basically it's a thriller, but it is a horror in the sense that she doesn't control her own life. She's being manipulated by these Satanists essentially, and it is a superb film. Mia Farrow is unbelievable in it. It's well worth a watch for anyone. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a scary film now, because obviously we've been through so much now in terms of horror films that it's hard to scare you, but it is a good horror film in the sense that it's well acted. John Cassavetes is in it, famous actor and director. Really, really good film overall. And Aiden said before we started he hadn't seen it, but Aiden, I'd say it's well worth watching it for yourself.
Yeah, I agree, Aiden. I know, obviously, out of all the films we've named here, I think it's the only one Aiden hasn't seen. I highly do recommend this. I think Andy just put it in a nutshell. But I remember I watched this. I'm not going to ruin the end. Don't worry, no spoilers for this one. But I knew the ending, and I was still mystified as to what was going on. Like, these neighbours are just being overly friendly. Her husband's just started making friends with them, and it's like, what the hell is going on here? And it's a really big mystery surrounding the movie, and I just think it's worth it till that final scene. This is what you call a proper build up, and then it all just makes sense at the end, and it's just totally worth it. But it's a great little story. Mia Farrow is, like you said, excellent in this film. But I forgot her husband's name in it. I forgot the actor's name. What's his name? Sorry.
John Cassavetes, who plays him. He's an actor director.
Yeah, sorry, you did name him. Yeah, I thought he was fantastic in the movie as well. But to be honest, Andy, I was a little creeped out of this film. I know you said it's not too scary, but at times I was thinking this is quite creepy, this, and it was playing on my mind a little bit.
What it does quite cleverly is it plays on your fears of not knowing what's going on. Obviously, we all like to be secure in our own homes, but as I say, we won't spoil it too much. She's just not in control of her own life, and there's just things, a build up of tension, and as you say, it builds the tension throughout the film. And I think, Roman Polanski, as I say, we won't go too much into him, but as a director, one of the greatest directors of all time, let's be honest, and this is one of his masterpieces, along with Chinatown, I feel. But the directing's great, the acting's great, the story's great, and I think, as I say, it comes out 5 years before The Exorcist comes out, and I think it starts that interest in occult films. So obviously, I think it's the height with The Exorcist, and obviously the craze that surrounded that.
I actually think it was ahead of its time, to be honest. I'm not taking away anything from the decade of the '60s, but I don't know. It just seemed like nothing had been done like that before. Like you said, the start of the occult film and stuff like that.
It's like a Hitchcockian film, but a modern and much more modern version. And Hitchcock, I think films don't really, I think the great films don't run, but they don't age as well as Rosemary's Baby do, because I think obviously the colour, the different type of storytelling. I think the late '60s obviously bleeds into the '70s with the realism of the films.
Yeah. Aiden, have you heard good stuff about Rosemary's Baby? Then are you going to plan on watching that one, do you think?
So, I know that it spawned a lot of movies based on around the occult. Obviously, we won't talk about Polanski too much, but I know that it was an inspiration for a movie that we're going to talk about later on, about cults and all sorts of stuff like that. I've heard good things, and I don't know why I haven't watched it yet. I think it is just because I've got the name Polanski tied to it, but you just sort of got to separate the art from the artist, really. It's one of them. I'll probably end up watching it in a few days now, just to see what all the buzz is about.
Yeah. In all honesty, I only watched this for the first time a couple of years ago. To be honest, it was just one of them. I hadn't watched for ages, but you know what? It was one of them. It lived up to all the good stuff I heard about it. So that's a great pick, that one, Andy. Probably the earliest movie in this list. I feel it might be anyway.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but like I said, ahead of the time, and if you watch that today, it doesn't feel dated, in my opinion. I just think it's still fantastic. So, anything else to say on Rosemary's Baby, Andy?
No, let's move on.
Really good pick, that one, mate, with a fantastic ending to that film. All right, Aiden, do you want to pick one of your four, mate? What have you got coming up next?
Okay, so I'll start first just by saying that the first two I'm going to pick, I wouldn't really say are like some of my favourites ever. Whilst I think that they're great, I've just got, I have to talk about these just because of how they impacted the world of the horror genre. So the one I'm going to start off with first, straight from the 1990s, directed by the master Wes Craven, is Scream. One of the best slashers that's ever been made, in my opinion. Ghostface, I'd probably say, is my favourite slasher villain, ahead of, your Jasons and your Michael Myers, and that is probably got one of, if not the best movie opening in a horror movie. That whole 15-20 minute scene with Drew Barrymore, and it's so self-aware. It plays in on itself so well, in my opinion. And the cast as well. Matthew Lillard, I can't really say enough nice things about Matthew Lillard. He's one of my favorite people in and outside of the screen. You got you got Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Neve Campbell, obviously, Sidney Prescott. Won't talk about the sequels too much because, well, they're not very good. But I can't really have enough good things to say about Scream. I think it's very, very well made.
Yeah. Anything to say on Scream, Andy? I've got a few things. But...
Yeah, I love Scream. I think I used to say this was the last great horror until about 2013, and I'll name that. I'll talk about that film later. But this is one of the great horror films, and I think again it sparked all those. I know what you did last summer, the urban legend type films, obviously the teen slasher films, and obviously even the comedy films, the scary movie franchise as well, is based off of this. But no, what I love about this film is I think it is very 90s, and I think it works mainly because obviously there's a lot of teen movies in the 90s, and it doesn't skip over the teen things. Obviously you've got Jamie Kennedy in the film, all the teen actors, and I think they do Skeet Ulrich, and they play the introduce them characters really well and give them a good backstory. And I think I like that. My favourite part about the film, I won't say too much more, but is that Drew Barrymore is such a big well-known actress following E.T. and she, spoiler alert, she dies within the first 10 minutes, and it's like, whoa, what's this about? You think she's a huge actress and she's gone within the first 10 minutes. And it's iconic, really. The phone calls, do you like scary movies and whatever. It's a great slasher film. And it is something to watch whenever it's on telly. It's very much a rewatchable film.
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying about Drew Barrymore there, I was reading up something the other day and she was actually crying on set because it was getting to her that much, the way she's getting treated by this killer and stuff. It's a shocking opening, but one of the best openings to a movie ever, like Aiden said. Not just any horror movie, but any movie in general, I feel. And she's on the posters and everything. You just don't see it. If you went to see that in 96, you wouldn't have guessed that was going to happen because she's like the main focus on the posters and stuff like that. But I do think it's good the way it's self-aware. It knows what it's doing. It talks about all the horror rules and stuff with Jamie. Is it Jamie Kennedy? Is that his name? I forgot his name. Randy. The way he's just explaining the rules of horror and stuff like that. And I wouldn't say ahead of its time, but reinvented the horror genre, if you like, I feel. And it's a bit of a masterpiece when you think about it. Wes Craven has come up with something exceptional here, I feel. And again, like the Halloween mask, it was just something simple, wasn't it? The ghost face, but it's iconic now. And what I like about this movie, I feel like it's one of them films you can watch, but a second time round, you see it from a totally different perspective because you know who the killers are. And you're like, why didn't I see that the first time round? And another thing was, look, I think everyone's seen Scream. I don't think this is a bad spoiler. I won't say who it is, but the fact that there was 2 killers in this, I don't think, if you've seen that coming back in the 90s, I would have to say you're a liar. Because it was just absolute genius. You're trying to guess who it is all the way through, and there's 2 of them. And it was just absolutely a brilliant ending to a film, I thought. Absolutely fantastic movie. And I don't mind the sequels, Aiden, to be honest. 3's not great, but 2 and 4 aren't bad.
Yeah. I'd just like to jump in here. I'd also like to say that I love the fact that, don't get me wrong, the acting isn't perfect in this film, but sometimes in horror films that works. Henry Winkler, the Fonz, is absolutely going for it. The scene where he dresses down the 2 lads, he is really intense there. It's like, whoa, what's the Fonz doing? And again, the Fonz meets Untimely Death as well. So the 2, probably most well-known people know Skeet Ulrich. Scream's 96. I think as good as it gets was 98, so that is before that. But no, it's a superb film. It's a great pick, Aiden, to be fair.
Just a little fun fact. Do you remember the caretaker dressed as Freddy Krueger?
Yeah.
That's actually Wes Craven, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say on that, Aiden?
I just think if you haven't seen it yet, it's definitely one to go out there and seek out as soon as you can. More so than some of the movies that are going to be picked and are chosen by you two as well, just because of its rewatchability factor. You get to see all the usual tropes of horror movies just being self-aware in themselves in this 1 hour and 50 odd minute just ride that it is. You get the main character, Sidney Prescott, by Neve Campbell. She's moaning about on the phone to the killers about what all the tropes are in the movies, and then unbeknownst to her, just ends up doing them herself about 5 minutes later. It's a great movie, and I think that anybody who likes the genre needs to seek it out.
It's a scream, baby.
Yeah. Oh, I hate the way they run up the stairs and then she runs up the stairs. That 1 hour 50 minutes, by the way, that 50 minutes takes place in the party. Towards the end of the film.
It is a great scene, though. Matthew Lillard and Jamie Kennedy are great in that scene.
Yeah. All right, then shall I go next? We've spoke about this one before, Andy, but I have to mention it in this Halloween special, and that is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974, I believe. Watched this again the other day. Just hasn't aged for me. I mean, it's just, I can watch this all the time. And like Halloween, I'm going to watch tomorrow. I watch this every October. It's just absolutely brilliant. From that opening scene where the narrator's talking, saying, you know, he's seen so much macabre and terrible stuff that day, and you just know you're in for a ride here. So when the hitchhiker gets in the van, and then obviously when Leatherface shows up, it's all just it's a hard watch. It's not, I wouldn't say it's enjoyable. It's more of a, you know, on the edge of your seat all the time type of watch, which could be enjoyable for some people. I don't know, but I mean, you know, obviously Toby Hooper, with the way he's filmed this, it's like he's documented it, and it's got a very gritty feel. For me, this is obviously the greatest horror of all time, for the fact that this could be real. I mean, would you put it past anyone in the outback of Texas now to be doing this? Because I wouldn't. You know, I would not be surprised if this was in the news tomorrow, that someone was cutting people up in some house in Texas, because it happens, and these are real people. So, and it is based on a true story, of course. But
it's frightening, really. I think the best part about this is, like you say, the grittiness makes it unsettling, because they are like real hicks, aren't they? And there's a bit unseat. The family's a bit. It's and as you say, there was for a long time. Obviously, this is pre-internet era. People used to think this could be real, or you know, it's found, you know, much before the Blair Witch found footage era. But that's what the feeling it given. Obviously, the iconic scene where, you know, Leatherface is swirling the chainsaw around is at the end. You know, the end. It's an iconic film. As I say, we've spoke about it before, Jordan. I'll let Aiden have his say on it.
So I didn't see this up until about 4 years ago, and I sort of went into it a little bit naive, just because of the release date and everything like that. And I come out and I was terrified. I don't think I've seen a horror movie be like as real as it is. Like, I did have to Google after, just like, did this actually happen? And, you know, obviously there's not some big fella with someone else's face on running around with a chainsaw, but I know that it was taken, Leatherface, the character, was inspiration from Ed Gein, the serial killer who went around digging up, you know, dead bodies and stuff like that. So
much more, yeah.
The only thing that I'd say lets this down a little bit for me is the characters. You know, the characters that you go in and you know that they're gonna make it, but that's a usual trope that there is in the slasher movies anyway. So you can't really hold it to that, just because of it being a film from 1974 on, like Halloween, a minuscule budget.
And when I watched this the other day as well, it was like my girlfriend, it was the first time she'd ever seen it, and she loved it. But you know, when that iconic moment when Leatherface slams that door, she was taken aback by it, and it's still effective today. But for me, where the girl's trying to escape the house and he pulls her back into the darkness, and then next minute she's on a meat hook and stuff. It's just everything you want in a horror film is in this movie. It really is. And, you know, like Andy was saying there about the ending scene where he's just swinging the chainsaw around and then it just finishes and you're like, whoa, I just went on a ride there, you know. But it's just absolutely fantastic. And people might disagree with this, but I sort of feel like Tobe Hooper might have fluked it a little bit. I don't know, because it's so well done. Did he mean it like this? I don't know. I mean, obviously he's gone for it a little bit, but I don't think even he knew that it'd come out this well done. You might disagree with that, but I don't know. I personally think that he never would have expected this to go on like the way it has?
I think the timing helps. This is why it's hard to look at films from the 70s now, and that's why it works well. I think the timing of when it was brought out, the grittiness of it. If you try to make this film now, people are going, it's not true. You can ring someone on your mobile and get out of this situation. But I think the timing helps and the realism. But yes, I think he did the Poltergeist after this, but I don't think he ever reached the same levels of sort of scariness as he did this. And I think Rob Zombie his entire career was inspired by this film, if you think about it. So yeah, I enjoy it. It's a great film, though. It's Leatherface is iconic, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, Rob Zombie's films are quite a lot like this. Anything else to say on that one, or should we move on? Or
like Andy said, the timing helped with this, I think, massively, because this was a year past The Exorcist as well, where people are going into cinemas believing that what they're going to be watching is real, and obviously the big scroll that happens, and you're seeing all of this gritty sort of big, like, fleshed out body, and the old camera noise effect, that sort of thing. You're watching this and you're like, Jesus Christ, what's going on here? I think the timing is impeccable for how they've done it.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, so that is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, my personal favourite horror movie of all time. I always struggle where to start with that one because there's just so much to say on it. But we'll move on then. Should we go back round to Andy and just go this way around?
Yeah, well, we just mentioned the film, and I think I'm going to do mine probably in close stuff in year order. So the next one is the 1973 classic film by William Friedkin, The Exorcist, which to me is still the greatest horror film ever made. I think, obviously, another film on my list is my favourite film ever made, but this to me is the quintessential high art horror film. I think William Friedkin, coming off the back of The French Connection, is a really great director. Sorcerer wasn't too great, to be fair, but whatever. No, this is the high point of his career, and I think Max von Sydow is superb, and funny, he was only 44 when this film was made. If you think about it, how was Max von Sydow not 70 years old for the last 35 years of his career? Because they aged him up for this, but no, it's great. There's Max von Sydow, Jason Miller. I actually heard, here's a little fact for you, that Jason Miller, who plays Father Karras, he turned down 3 years later to read Rolling Taxi Driver before Robert De Niro got it. What a terrible mistake that was.
What, the lead of Taxi Driver?
Yeah, it turns down.
Wow.
Crazy, that decision. Anyway, but no, in terms of this film, it is the original, like, a cult film. Again, people used to run out into the streets when they seen this. Obviously, Linda Blair playing the child actress. Mike Nichols turned down directing this film because he said they couldn't find the 12-year-old girl who carried the film, and Linda Blair is just fantastic, and Ellen Burstyn as a mother's also brilliant. The film builds greatly. I love the scene where Ellen Burstyn goes to meet Father Karras, and she's talking about an exorcism, and he's like, they haven't done one since the 1600s. It's sort of like, what are you on about? And then he obviously finds out about the exorcism, and when Max von Sydow obviously rolls up to the house, the fog set, Tubular Bells plays, and we're off and rolling then for the exorcism. I think it's just a superb film, and I think there's loads of creepy bits that and obviously it's a bit weird as well with the crucifix, but apart from that, it is just, I think, to me, it's the greatest horror film ever, and it's really rewatchable. You can put it on, you can get you can start watching it anytime, halfway through you'd stick with it. It's just a superb film.
Yeah, totally agree, mate. Totally agree. Yeah. Anything to say on the Exorcist, Aiden? And I've got a few things, but I want to let you go first.
So, again, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I didn't see this one like growing up or anything like that.
Oh,
I seen it for the first time about 3 years ago, and I was gobsmacked as to how good it was. Like, you just picked up on it. I'll just say it. That shot of the light coming down onto the street is iconic, and obviously the practical effects in this as well are top notch for something that was made in 1973. And you got to think as well, the only thing that people would have had on that sort of level before that would have been your other pick before, Rosemary's Baby, or Psycho before that. People weren't ready for a movie like this, and it shows. I watched a little featurette the other week, and of people coming out of the cinema, they were fainting, and people were throwing up and things like that. This changed people's lives in ways that they weren't expecting. They were just expecting a normal bog standard, scary movie. and it changed the game in the world of horror, and you've got to give it credit for that.
I agree. I always say that about The Exorcist. Roll back to 1973. If you're going to cinema to see this, you're coming out terrified, aren't you? If you don't leave before the movie finishes, to be honest, because you'd be that terrified. But like, what I like about it, there's a little backstory as well. Like, I watched a thing called Cursed Films the other day, and there was all sorts going on set. There was like
Fires.
Yeah, Linda Blair actually got hurt. Where she's got to sit up. The thing's just propelling her forward when she's sitting up and down on the bed. So that just adds to it, I feel, and you feel like maybe the set was actually taken over by a demon. Obviously, it wasn't, but yeah, Pazuzu, yeah. So it obviously gives it that feel, and it's got a story behind it. It's just that to me makes it even more iconic. There's loads of tales about The Exorcist and people fainting, obviously, and stuff like that. One scene in this that always gets me, especially when watching it in pitch black, is where Father Karras is always having that, that dream of his mum going down the subway. The Buzu's face it's horrible, isn't it? But when that demon's face just comes on the screen, oh my god!
I think it's awful when he turns his back and the devil's doing the voices, and it does the homeless man. Somebody thought boy, he's just like really creepy. But no, William Friedkin, like really intense director. Like the Father Karras' best friend, who's also a priest, and he finds, spoiler alert, Father Karras at the bottom of the stairs at the end of the film. Right before they filmed that scene, William Friedkin punched the actor in the face to get him to look upset. Jesus. Yeah. and for the devil's voice, he tied the voice actor to a chair, so she would sound like she was restrained when she was doing the voice. Insane, but no, superb. William Friedkin went the extra mile just to get the best performances out of these people.
It worked.
Yeah,
just lastly, I'll just say it's just weird watching this 12-year-old girl, or what is she, 12 in the movie, just going from this little young innocent girl to this horrible monster. It's really
it goes from Captain Hardy to the devil,
Yeah. Weird, isn't it? Yeah. All right, that is The Exorcist. I'm sure a lot of the people watching have seen it. Absolutely iconic movie. So, should we move on then? Next movie. Great pick, Andy, by the way.
Thank you.
So, Aiden, do you want to go next?
So, I've picked this just because, again, it's spawned on something entirely new. Written, directed by James Wan from 2004 is Saw.
Yeah.
Absolutely unbelievable movie. A movie that has spawned, I think, 7 or 8 sequels, with another coming out. Coining the phrase torture porn is, need to take some doing to do that, and they did that with Saw. It's got, I think, Danny Glover in it. I'm awful with names, so you're gonna have to forgive me. Written and starring Lee Winnell, who did The Invisible Man and Upgrade, which you should definitely watch as well.
It's very good.
But Insidious 3 is another underrated movie that he's made.
For me, Jigsaw, the Jigsaw Killer is iconic. No matter what you think of the other movies, the whole setup with the I want to play a game, with the puppet, with the traps, and with the ways that he tries to get into people's minds. You just don't get that with all of the other mainstream horror movie villains. And I think for me, I'd say this has one of my favorite endings in a movie ever, easily.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, mate. That's what my best thing about the Saw movie is, the ending. It's, you know what, it's probably my favorite ending of all time, and that is saying something. Because I just did not see that coming, and when I seen it and the way it's all put together and stuff, my jaw was on the floor. But it's just a simple film as well, isn't it? Really, it's just 2 guys in a chain to a bathtub. But the story that unfolds is quite amazing to see. And I remember watching a featurette on this, and James Wan and Lee Winnell just came in one day and said, "Yeah, well, let's just talk about this simple concept," and they came up with this, and like you said, it spawned so many sequels. But It's a fantastic film, and definitely in my top 10 horror movies of all time. But what have you seen Saw, Andy? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it is a good film, and as I say, don't be wrong, I didn't rate this highly as I do other some other horror films, but like Aiden rightly says, it does change the game somewhat. And I think this is the era where horror films became about those swerves, if you will, much like films. Obviously, The Usual Suspects obviously being a major swerve, and Sixth Sense, and you sort of build up from there. And I think this is the end is a big swerve, isn't it? You don't really know what's going on. I don't always say his name correctly. Carrie Elwes, whatever his name is. Really great actor, obviously Princess Bride, and other things from that, Kiss the Girls as well from the 90s. But it is just a great film, and it's clever, really. It's took some thought. It's not just a person stabbed. I know, obviously, in horror films, the deaths are well thought out, but this is really clever. And the whole it's big mystery, the whole thing, and if you're slowly putting the clues together, it is a really good film. And again, eminently rewatchable. You can rewatch it over and over again, even though you know the end. And yeah, the end is shocking, really. And it's a really good film overall. Yeah.
But like kind of bit like a Seven vibe going for it, where it's like a crime thriller sort of thing, but definitely more horror involved.
You can see that. You can see the Seven influences on it, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Just going by the end, and again, I just watch that on YouTube sometimes. The last 3 minutes.
I do that with some films.
It's everything about it, the whole sort of the transitions that they're using, going along with the big reveal that's happening before your eyes. That score that is on, is one of my favorites, I think, ever. It's simple, but in how it's used, it works so well. And then obviously ending with, I think, a nod to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with the way that Tobin Bell shuts that door, saying "game over." It's unbelievable.
I do agree. The score is fantastic, and it makes that ending. But it's a great story. It really is. A great story that unfolds from something very, very simple. So that is Saw. Have we got anything else to say on that, lads? So,
nope.
Brilliant film. Good pick, Aiden. I was going to actually pick that until you did, but okay. Okay, here we go. I'll go with my third choice then, and I'm going to go with Candyman. Now, this is another film I feel like The Exorcist a little bit, where people were terrified of this in the 90s from stories I've heard. I still haven't said Candyman in the mirror 5 times. I can't do it. I don't want to risk it, but it feels like it sort of takes place in this, this say a rough area or like a poor area or whatever, and there's this legend of Candyman, obviously, and everyone's talking about him. And this investigator, Virginia Madsen, goes to find out about him. But it feels like you're actually there, I feel. The location is a big part of this movie. And I just think it's really, really scary. But Tony Todd is fantastic as Candyman. This is the deep voice. He's got that horrible hook on his hand. But it's like actually shoved into his little stump. And it's just a fantastic film, a very, very underrated movie. It's really, really violent, actually. The last time I watched it, I didn't remember how violent it was, but just a very, very scary film, I feel. If you're getting into horror, I feel like this is one to start with. But I remember when I was a kid, my dad got me this from the video shop. I was just getting into horror, and I seen that scene with the little Portaloo with the kids in there and lying in the pool of blood. I just ran down out the room and went, "What the hell have you got me out there?" I weren't ready for it, but it terrified me as a kid, this film, and a fantastic movie with a good origin story for the Candyman, I feel. Obviously, he's like, he's stung by all the bees, isn't he? And he comes from a poor family and stuff, and he's coming back to get vengeance, basically. But I just think it's brilliant. I'm really looking forward to the remake or the sequel, if you like. But any thoughts on Candyman, lads? Anyone want to go first? Andy, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is the film I've probably seen the least on the list, and it's not because I don't like it. It is a good film. It's a classic, if you will. I think that the key thing I can say about this film is someone who grew up in the 90s. People genuinely thought this was real. Like, people would not do the Candyman in the mirror. Like, even when I met my girlfriend in 2006, she still talks about the Candyman now, and in that reverence of like, it was such a scary film, and like people were like terrified to actually say the words. I'm not scared. I'm not going to do it now, but I'm not scared. But it's one of those things, isn't it? No, it is a terrifying film, and it is gory, very low budget film. Bernard Rose. I can't really remember much else that he did. I think he did the film later on. That was what did he do later? I can't remember. But no, it is a good film, and the backstory is good. And the character Tony Todd plays is perfect. He is just terrifying. The deep voice. It is a really iconic film, and I'll let Aiden say some more on it.
What else is there to say, really? Tony Todd is an absolute... Tony Todd is a revelation in this movie. I think Candyman is one of my favorite horror character reveals of all time, because you don't see him up until about 40 odd minutes into the movie. That scene in the car park, and you just hear his voice echoing around. But I think Helen is the name of the main character in it. And you see that she's being hypnotized by him with this big massive coat on, this horrible hook hand. And yeah, another thing as well, I mentioned it was Saw. The score in this movie by, I think, Philip Glass is top notch, especially for a low budget horror movie in the 90s, which had a lot going for it at the time. And the messages that this movie shows as well, not just about, you can't just go into the movie, watch it, and then not think about it afterwards. This movie plays on, things like race, obviously where they go. I think Cabrini Green is the name of the place. That they used actual people living in the area at the time to use as extras in the movie. The scene, I think, where she first goes into the building, they're actual people in gangs at the time. I remember reading up on that. So I think, yeah, Candyman's a great show, and I won't argue that one bit.
Interesting that you thought about the reveal there, because she has a few fake run-ins, if you like, with people who she thinks Candyman, or things aren't working when you're meant to summon them and stuff. But when the final reveal happens and you hear the voice in the car park, it's like Tony Todd is born to play that part. And just a quick one, I think you already know this, but Clive Barker is the writer of this film, and it was based on a short story called The Following. I think it's The Following, based in Liverpool. So, and we're all from Liverpool, aren't we? So, which is a bit of a fun fact there for anyone who didn't know. So, yeah, that is Candyman. Fantastic movie. I love it. Very, very underrated, I feel. So, okay, Andy, should we swing around to you then? Andy,
got it. Yeah, got it. Yeah, no problem. No, I've got it now. So yeah, I'm going to choose since obviously Aiden chose Saw, I'm going to choose the James Wan film, The Conjuring, from 2013. Now, for me, this really put horror. Don't get me wrong, there's been some good horrors over the years, low budget horrors, but for me, this was the real return of horror films made. The reason being is I often complain that the issue with horror films is there's too many horror films made, because they are an easy win, aren't they? People are going to watch horror films because they want to be scared. But so many are made with bad stories and bad actors. And I think when you choose the right actors, in this one, you've got Vera Farmiga and what's his name?
Patrick Wilson,
sorry, yeah. And obviously in Insidious as well. This is why this film works so well. And it's also based on a true story. Ed and Lorraine Warren, obviously, to do with the Amityville horror, obviously in the 70s as well. So it's got all of the necessary elements. I think it's just so well acted. I think the direction's great. I think the scariest bit for me is the clapping. It just freaks you out. And I think it's just a great watch. And even though it is scary in its elements, but I think it's just an interesting story as well. And I think it was a return for high value horror films. Really, and I think this is when horror's done great like this. I think it's perfect.
Yeah, you want to say on The Conjuring, Aiden?
So for me, and I think this is a good horror movie, I prefer the sequel.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I didn't like The Conjuring the first time I watched it. I needed a second watch just to sort of turn me over a little bit. I think, you look back at it, 2013, you hadn't really had much the early 2010s horror-wise. I think the last, we'll call it properly scary movie before then, just off the top of my head, was The Descent. That's a good few years away from what The Conjuring did, and it also spawned the start of the summer horror blockbuster as well. Big budget, big, camera work and effects and all sorts of things like that. And obviously, people went in scared, and it spawned this massive universe on of it in itself. You got how many films in that sort of franchise now? I haven't watched them all. Some of them aren't that great. But I think The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2 are two very good watches if you're looking for a horror movie and a sequel, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. Got a third coming out as well next year. But I've only seen this movie once, I must admit, but I do remember really, really liking it. It was a solid horror film. And you know what, Andy, like you, my dad always said, like, he's not into horror that much, but he loved this film. He thought it didn't go in any stupid directions or anything like that. It was a really good story with a good, just good jump scares and everything like that. But I think jump scares can be cheap, but they're really well done in this film. Some of the best I've seen, to be honest, like you said, with the hand clap. And at first you see the little tennis ball and stuff come down the stairs just before it. And
it's some of the actual main story is scary enough, but some of the main scares with Annabelle the doll, the kid, and I think it makes you care about the characters a lot. This film, which is key. I think in horror films you don't care about the people who are in danger, so you end because it's more about the protagonist usually. So I think that the antagonist. Sorry, but I think this is a really great horror film, and like Aiden said, it did start that summer blockbuster horror films, and there's been so many since. And as you say, it's like so many different franchises. And James Wan even went on to direct the Fast and the Furious film and Aquaman, so he's done excellently from him.
Yeah, I do think Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson are great chemistry on this. They're a good little team, man. Yeah, she's one of my favorite actresses. Like, big fan of Bates Motel, which she's in as well. But yeah, I can't really say too much on this because it's been a long time since I've seen it. But I do remember really, really liking it. It was a really good film. And Aiden, like you said, I do like the sequel as well. It's not as scary, but it's a good story.
Yeah.
So it's got a good story like the first two as well. But they are good stories, good haunted house stories, really, aren't they? But that is The Conjuring. Anything else to say on that one, lads? No? Definitely one of the best horror films in the past 20 years, let's put it that way. Okay, so is it you next, Aiden, isn't it? Yeah.
I believe so. So I'm going to just do a little bit of a monologue, we'll call it, before I go into it. This is a movie from 2018, and horror movies up until that point, especially after The Conjuring, you're expecting the same sort of formula into things like that. The movie I'm about to pick is the last movie I think that terrified me, bar I think The Lighthouse. And this is a first feature directed movie by Ari Aster, and that is Hereditary. A24 knocked it out of the park with this one. Toni Collette gives one of my favourite performances I've ever seen on the big screen. I could talk about this movie for ages, absolutely ages. The fact that she didn't get an Oscar nomination, I am baffled. This, without spoiling anything, this movie's got one of the most bone-chilling deaths I've ever seen, and it happens only about half an hour in, and it's completely just like that. You don't know what's just happened. Everyone in this movie just does an outstanding job. You got Gabriel Byrne, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, who did her first role as Charlie. I have nothing but good things to say about Hereditary, and I tweeted last night, I think, because I watched it last night as well, that it's in my top 3 horror movies ever.
I've got a backstory with this because we watched this, and me and my girlfriend watched this in the pictures, and she absolutely loves this film, and Midsummer, of course, which is also by Ari Aster. And she talked about this film and watched every video on YouTube for about a year after it. I then, to make it be quiet, bought the DVD, which you don't do anymore, obviously. I know Jordan's big on buying DVDs. And then the next day it was on Amazon Prime, which was clever by me. So, all in all, as it worked out, not so well. But no, this is a good film, to be fair. I went to see this on the pictures, and like you say, Aiden, the death, which is in the 30 minutes, you're like, whoa, isn't this film about this person? Completely shifts aspect. And I think this has got a lot of elements of Rosemary's Baby. I think Jordan understand what I'm saying here, in terms of the occult and that sort of you don't really know what's quite going on. The control over the children's lives is not really the parents. And I think, like Aiden said, I'll back him up when he said that. Toni Collette is superb in this film, and no doubt in my mind she should have had an Oscar nomination for this film. She was great. Don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect film for me, but it is a really good horror film. And Ari Aster's a different type of horror director. He adds mystery, and you don't quite know what's going on. It's a bit peculiar, but I think it works really well as something different in the market.
Yeah, I love this film. I absolutely love it. Probably I think I've done a video on my top 10 movies of the decade when I first started YouTube, and this was in it. Not horror movies, just movies, and this was in it. I love it that much. It's fantastic. Like you said, Toni Collette, absolutely amazing. She is a brilliant actress, but this for me is the best I've ever seen her. It's
Not
just
Muriel's Wedding.
Which one? Sorry,
Not Muriel's Wedding. No, come on.
I haven't seen it. But no, I just think it's a modern classic, if you like. I think people will be looking at this in 20 years going, oh, that's a brilliant film from that era, stuff like that. I just think it's brilliant. It is. And like you said, that first half an hour, I didn't see that coming. I was just like, oh my god. But what I like about it, we talked about The Conjuring then with the jump scares, which are done really, really well. This doesn't rely on that. It's a different type of horror. It sort of plays on your mind a little bit. And I loved it. I loved the third act, the way it all unfolds and everything. It's got a great ending. I think you two have pretty much nailed everything that I need to say on about it. It's just brilliant. And a certain scene which I won't give away with involving Gabriel Byrne, I was just like, oh my god. I think it happened about an hour into the film. I think you might know what I'm on about, but I was just like, oh my god, didn't see that one coming. But it's just a fantastic film, it really is. May 24, of course, who put out some brilliant films, but this is one of their best for sure. But yeah, I think you two have pretty much nailed Hereditary. That's a film I've only seen once, but I remember just loving it. It was fantastic. I've heard that one as well, like a bit like Scream. You watch it again, you see it from a different perspective. That's true, Aiden?
I feel that way, yeah. You pick up on a lot more, just sort of background stuff that's happening, and you take into account the stuff that you already know. You're like, right.
It is a film that leaves a lot of questions. As I say, my missus was really like trying to find out the little nuggets in it, and you do. The more you watch, the more you understand the different aspects, like the nan and the book, and there's all sorts of things going on. But it's really, really clever. I think Gabriel Byrne actually is really understated in this film, which is quite unusual for him. So it's a good performance, actually.
I think Ari Aster said he's not going to do horror anymore, which is a shame, really, because they are two fantastic movies he's made, to be honest. I do think it's a better one out of the two.
Yeah, Midsummer's crackers. It's good, it's crackers.
I went to watch Midsommar the first day it come out. It wasn't a big screening in the cinema, and I think by the end of it, there was just me and two other people in there. They walked out just before that, we'll call it raunchy scene.
Crazy.
I liked it, so I would have stayed in the pictures to watch that.
Always stay to the end.
What was that, sorry, Andy?
Always stay to the end.
Yeah, you got to, mate. I never turn films off, but I am guilty of doing it one or twice. But okay, then should we move on, Aiden, or anything else?
If I could talk about this movie for hours, I would, but I am more than happy to leave the stage to you.
Great pick, mate. Great pick. Probably the best horror I've seen. Well, the best last horror that was made. If I think about it, Invisible Man was quite good as well, but not on Heredity's level. Okay, so I'm gonna go with my final pick, and that is something that I don't think anyone's seen. That is A Nightmare on Elm Street. What I love about this film is the fact that if you go to sleep, you're in trouble, basically, and you've got to go to sleep. You can't stay awake forever. And this guy called Freddy is going to come for you in your dreams, and he haunts people in the nightmares. It's a brilliant concept, and just another brilliant idea by Wes Craven. I think I can't remember how he actually come up with it, but it was something really simple. I think he just something to do with the house over the road, or someone died in the sleep over the road, or something from him, and that's how he come up with it. Quite simple, really, but I just think it's one of them. It's a supernatural slasher Freddy, isn't he? He's not like one of them who just goes around and kills people at Camp Crystal Lake or in the middle of Haddonfield. He comes into your dream, so it's like kind of supernatural, and he is an iconic character. Borderline jokey, borderline horror. In the first 3 movies, I think it's done really well. But then he did start to become a bit of a comedian. But he is iconic mainly for the first film, I feel. And what I like about it as well, you got the protagonist, the main girl. You think it's gonna be, and half an hour later we do switch to Heather Langenkamp, and I thought that was had a bit of a Psycho feel to it there, really. What Psycho does in that film. So yeah, I just think it's a really good film. Johnny Depp, his first movie, he's not great in it. His death is quite good. But any thoughts on Nightmare on Elm Street? I mean, obviously it was very successful because there's like 9 or 10 films now. So, do you want to go first, Andy? Or
no, it's a classic, isn't it? It's I think the best horrors work when the films that play into everyday life or something your own life. And going to sleep and having a murderer chase you in your sleep is just, it plays on fears, doesn't it? Because the dream world is this mysterious, and obviously, I like the backstory. I don't think they played the backstory greatly in the first film, but I think the backstory of him being, a paedophile, all the kids in the neighborhood, all the parents in the neighborhood burned to death. It's a really good story, and I think it's excellent. And I think the fact that the way he chases them through, it's really scary. And then and obviously the first thing you do after a film late at night is go to bed. And when you go to bed, this film is playing on your mind. I think it's really clever. Wes Craven obviously is a master of building suspense and building a character, and I think this is a really great film. Johnny Depp's death's it is good, but it's also quite funny, really, in the way he dies. But you shouldn't say that, but it is. But yeah, no, superb film. One of the best horror films of the 80s.
No, there's no way no one's got that much blood in the body.
No, it's literally floor to the wall. Yeah, it's just like whoa.
Yeah. But, anything to say on that one, Aiden? The Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, go on for a long time. There's a lot of sequels that I do enjoy as well, but I was mainly just focusing on the first one because it's like an iconic horror film. But anything to say on Nightmare on Elm Street?
Nothing more that's already been said, really, other than some more behind the scenes stuff. And this was a big win for New Line in particular. This movie only had a budget of about $2 million, and I think they got about 60 at the box office, which at the time for 1984 is massive, especially at the time New Line would have been pretty up and coming at that point.
Huge now. Yeah.
Freddy Krueger, I mean, come on, you can't say too much else about him. He's growing up for me. This was one of the movies in the house that was banned. You couldn't watch this one. You couldn't watch The Exorcist. Movies like that. The fear is what mainly plays in on you when you watch The Nightmare on Elm Street, just because of a man is infiltrating your dreams. That's your safe space. You can't think of a horror movie and not think of people like Freddy Krueger. It's absolutely unbelievable, and I'd love Robert Englund to do one more movie.
Yeah. A little quick story on this for me. A Nightmare on Elm Street is actually what got me into horror fully, because I was in school and I was only like 6 or 7, and these lads in front of me in the dinner queue were talking about this movie with this man with the burnt face killing kids and stuff, and I was like, what the hell is this film? Like, I didn't even know films like this existed, to be honest. I was just like, you didn't have the internet or nothing back then. So I went home and went, Mum, can I watch this film called Freddy? And she was like, no, you're not watching that. You're joking, aren't you? Like you said, it was banned in our house. So I nagged her for about 3 years. And I think it was like when I was like 10, she'd finally let me watch it. My dad brought it home from the shop and went, yeah, I've got you. And it was Nightmare on Elm Street 3, actually. And she went,
best of the rest.
My sister, who's 3 years younger than me, she just went, Jordan, make sure you let your sister watch it with you. I was like, what? Just begged you for 3 years to let me watch that.
Top level parent.
It just seems so unfair, but I was actually really scared of it, to be honest, when I first watched it. But that is Nightmare on Elm Street, so yeah, not much more to say, is there? I think we've all seen Nightmare on Elm Street. So All right then, Andy. Should we move on to is it your final film? Is it?
It's my final film, one of the greatest films ever made. I'm going to say it now. Some people will say it's a thriller, but it is a horror as well. Like the same conversation you have about aliens. I don't want to get involved in the thriller, horror, whatever. Yeah, you know. Oh, it's not aliens. Sorry. So this is the 1975 Steven Spielberg classic, Jaws. Now, the reason I picked this as a horror film, and it is a thriller, don't be wrong, it's got so many different elements to it, but I was in the sea on holiday recently, and I am still deathly afraid of sharks. This sparked a real fascination in sharks for me from when I was a kid, and now I have real life anxiety about being in the sea. I'm always looking over my shoulder, always expecting the fin to fly up as I come out the water, but no, this to me is a really great piece of, obviously Steven Spielberg did Duel a couple of years before he did this, about the truck that was chasing the man on the highway, and the same elements as this is like the shark is, but you don't see it throughout the film until obviously the Shuman scene where he says he's going to need a bigger boat. But this to me is a film that really has a lasting impression on the audience, and the fact that this changed the way people view going in the water, I think. And I think whether people think it's a horror or not, this shark is scary. It kills people in the water. I always remember the kid on the Lilo. I even said to my missus when we were on holiday, "Don't get a Lilo." Alex Kitter was killed on a Lilo. So this is how much of an effect this film's had on me. Don't kitten the boy all over the dock line, all that sort of stuff. That's a real effect. And to me, it's just so unnerving being in the sea with because of the Jaws. And I think its effect on society, I think, is why it's a great horror film. I think it's everlasting. Let's be honest, the acting is outrageous, and Robert Shaw as Quint is one of the best performances in any film. And even the Indianapolis speech is chilling. Basically when he talks about his friend, the bosun's mate, who's bitten in half by a tiger shark. It's frightening. It's a frightening film. My favourite film ever made. Thank you, Steven Spielberg.
Great way to end that little speech.
Piece eventually as well.
Have you seen Jaws, Aiden? I'm sure you have.
I mean, I grew up loving sharks. I was fascinated by them. I'd do research. I'd buy any book that had a shark on the front of it, And then I seen Jaws, and it stayed with me ever since. Jaws is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Good man.
In particularly that opening. You can't say much about Jaws and not talk about the opening.
You go swimming at night. Who goes swimming at night?
Yeah, exactly. Come on. And, Spielberg, and this was a development hell of a movie as well. They could have easily pulled the plug on this at so many different times. I think this movie ended up being 9 months out of schedule. So, you can't talk about, a horror movie and not think of a killer shark that's going around eating people. I was lucky enough to see this in the cinema last year, and it doesn't change. Like, it had been a little bit since I'd seen it as well. So the particular jump scene when Richard Dreyfuss goes underwater, and you see the head, that noise in the cinema, definitely.
The score by John Williams is literally the most frightening music that's ever been created ever. If you're on the water and it starts, the anxiety level build. It's just an anxiety song, and I think it's just, I don't know, it's just perfect.
Always on holiday as well. You always get that one person who does it in the pool, don't you? I feel the same as you, Andy. I don't like going in the sea because of this film. It really has played. It's one of them that plays on your mind. There's two movies really that played on my mind. Final Destination with the plane.
Oh yeah, Jesus, yeah.
And this really, like, I don't like going in the sea. Even like, everyone says, "Oh, the sharks are far out," but that kid in the 20 minutes of the movie, he's only there. He's only
let me tell you this. I told my missus this. 80% of shark attacks happen in less than 3 foot of water. So don't say if shark attacks are out at sea. They happen where you're supposed to be. So people, be afraid. Be very afraid.
Yeah, Andy, that was my one thing that let me go in the sea. Now you've told me that.
It's below like height, so you're in trouble.
No, it's a fantastic film. It is one of the best films ever made. Just I always like that scene where he's telling about his mates getting picked off. Is that what you mentioned then? Quint, is it?
Yeah, Indianapolis story. Yeah.
That's a horrifying little
True
monologue.
story, yeah, true story as well. No, I think what Aiden said there with the shoot, if the shark had been perfect, you may not have got it as a good film because you have to decide to use the shark less, and you don't see it until about the 50th minute of the film. And it works so well because it's a rubber shark at the end of the day. If you'd seen that in the first 10 minutes, like, oh god, what's that?
Yeah.
But they build it up, and obviously Ron and Valerie Taylor, who were the underwater photographers, went to Australia and filmed Great White Sharks underwater. They did a fantastic job as well, and I think it's just how Spielberg builds the film, and it's just this menace that won't stop chasing them, and and obviously Ben Gardner's boat with this. That still gets me, where he's like trying to pull the tooth out of the boat, and Ben Gardner comes and his eyes out. It's like really, it's a big jump scare which really works. And same with where it comes out the waters when Bush Riders chum in the boat as well. Really great scare scenes as well. Everlasting effect.
Full of iconic moments, that film, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a political thriller that becomes a horror film. What can I say? I always say this, that it's about the mayor trying to keep the beaches open. It's political, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Well, now that you mention it, I've never really thought of it too much like that. But yeah.
no one has except me.
I was going to say something then about it. Yeah, it's kind of like the shark isn't just doing it for food. It's like he likes killing people.
Yeah, it's not a sport, isn't he? And I think after this, I think 1977 they made Orca, which is about to kill a whale that kills people. Don't think that works so well. I think this basically spun off every different shark film. I think that the next, Deep Blue Sea's all right, but I think The Reef is a particularly good shark film. Have you ever seen that? That's quite menacing. But apart from that, they've never been able to. Once the first one's ever done like this, you'll never be able to create a shark film as good as this, especially when you try with the Meg.
I was just going to say, Meg.
Yeah, that is absolutely. Saying that, I don't mind bad films, so it was all right.
You brought up Deep Blue Sea. It's my favourite B movie of all time.
It is great, to be fair.
I love Deep Blue Sea so much.
Samuel Jackson's speech and the fact that when she was, my God, they're swimming backwards. That's just fantastic.
You see Stellan Skarsgård just arm get ripped,
yeah,
and then get absolutely launched while he's on a stretcher. You're like,
yes.
Am I watching a real movie?
It's like Snakes on a Plane, but a underwater version. That's what I think of it like.
A good way of putting it is nothing has really been able to replicate Jaws.
I don't think many films have. I think there's Peter Benchley probably never wrote a greater story. I remember they did a TV movie in the 90s called The Beast about a giant squid. That wasn't that good, but no, it's just iconic, and I will watch it any time. But I think for people who've never seen it, it's a great film to watch around this time of year.
Yeah. Anything else to say? No.
Well, Jaws, it's a masterclass. I think not the best ever. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But Jaws started the summer blockbuster. In general, people would go to the cinema in the 70s, and The Exorcist had happened. That was the highest grossing movie at the time, and then Jaws came along and just put it up tenfold. Like, if Jaws didn't happen, I don't think you get anyway near the level of movies that we have now because of that movie. I don't think anything like Marvel and that happens without Jaws. Anything on that sort of line just started off with a shark eating tourists. I think if you haven't seen Jaws, then I mean, come on, come on.
You're not a film fan, really, are you? Let's be honest.
Yeah, it's like was that like the big first summer blockbuster, really?
Yeah. So it's just 2 years before Star Wars comes out, 77, isn't it? So, and I think without that, and all that, it's called the summer blockbuster. Starts the summer blockbuster. What they reckon this and a couple of other films ended New Hollywood, didn't they? That New Hollywood phase, and the director was all consuming.
All right, then, Aiden, do you want to should we move on to your last pick, mate?
Right.
Handy, by the way.
If I could talk about Hereditary for hours, I could talk about The Shining for days. This is my favorite horror movie of all time. I'd say it's in my top 5 movies of all time, easily. Jack Nicholson, I think, gives my best performance, my most favorite performance ever. The Kubrick is an absolute master of the camera. The opening with the music. You know, you're just watching some fella just drive up into a hotel in the middle of nowhere, and you're scared.
Yeah.
The Shining's just an absolute marvel of tension and scares and story, and to get all of them perfectly, I think you can't really say much more about it. It's the best Stephen King adaptation, even though he hated it, and he prefers the miniseries that happened. I wouldn't go that far, but you know, The Shining's just an unbelievable piece of cinema.
This is, don't get me wrong, I love Jaws more, but this is one of the greatest acting performances in the history of cinema for me. And the fact that he wasn't even nominated for an Oscar is absolutely crazy. It's crazy. I don't think this film works on any level without Jack Nicholson. I think he's the perfect blend of a likable rogue, where he can play understated at the start as this everyday family man, but a bit of an edge, obviously. And then the descent into madness with those eyebrows and the change of face he can do. It's just perfect of his descent into madness. And one of my all-time favourite scenes in anything is obviously the door scene where he was all huff and all puff. It's all like that. It's the overacting's major, but it's just so brilliant. It's so menacing, and obviously then he did Here's Johnny, which obviously 1,000 stories have been told about it. He obviously ad-libbed that, but it's just such an iconic film, and I like everything about Little Danny, Scatman Carruthers as well, with the Shining. I even like the Simpsons rip-off years later, The Shining. I think it is an iconic film, and every time it's on, it's just so you can't stop. When I want to watch it, I can't stop watching it. I haven't seen Doctor Sleep yet. I probably never will. I'm going to be honest, but this is what a perfect horror film in a lot of ways.
I agree with both of you, by the way. But what Aiden was saying about when he's just driving to the hotel, there's so many scenes like that scare me in this film. Like it's the bit where he telepathically first speaks to Danny. The Mr. Halloran, is it?
Yeah, Dick Halloran.
Yeah. When he does that telepathically and says, "How'd you like my screen?" That gets me. That sends chills up my spine. But he's not even a bad person, is he? It's just the way you see it and the way Kubrick does it is just really, really effective, I feel. And there's a lot of imagery in there that add to the scares, I feel. Just like
the bunny
with the blood coming down and two twins just standing there, basically kind of like Papuzu off The Exorcist, where it just flashes on screen and stuff. It's a very artistic film, I feel, the way the imagery is put across, but a great story as well. And yeah, like you both mentioned, Jack Nicholson is absolutely amazing in this. That is just an iconic scene where he's just looking through the wooden door that he's just splashed open. It's a cinematic image, isn't it? Really, I mean, everyone knows that. But yeah, it's fantastic, and Doctor Sleep isn't very good.
Do you know what I think really works about this film? That Stanley Kubrick's the director. He doesn't waste a frame, and
yeah,
I'm just remembering now, thinking about the film. I love the bits where he's at the bar, and to him it's all so real and casual, but to us it's like, well, what is going on here? This is really creepy. And the bunny and the man, is it the bunny suit he's in? And the bear. That's
like the woman.
The woman in the bath. It's all like really creepy imagery, but. And there's so many there's so many little nuggets, is what they call about this film. People are always looking for new little symbolisms. But the essential line, if anyone hasn't seen, is cabin fever, essentially. It's a man who wants to write the great American novel, who basically can't write the great American novel because he's not good enough, maybe, in a sense. And it just descends into madness. But it's just, and obviously with the adding part of Danny having The Shining as well. It's a superb film and a great pick, really.
I'll go back to you now, Aiden, but what you said, Andy, there, he doesn't waste a frame. That is very, very true. Every scene is carefully crafted together, and I think I don't know how many takes he's done for each scene or whatever, but he has nailed them down really to perfection, hasn't he? And go on, Aiden. Anything else you want to say on The Shining? Or
you mentioned the number of takes there. I couldn't talk about this movie and not talk about the way that Kubrick was to Shelley Duvall.
Yeah,
I think it was a purposefully thing done, but like we were talking about with Friedkin and some of the actors on the set of The Exorcist before, the finished product, Shelley Duvall is outstanding in this movie because of the way that her and Kubrick's relationship was, and I think she has warmed to it since. So so long as there's no bad blood there, it's all right. The You know, the Here's Johnny scene, you see just the amount of terror that's in her eyes, you know, and you're thinking behind the scenes, how many times has she had to do this, you know, and then which one is it actually going to end on? They do it like 80 odd takes of it, and Kubrick might just pick like the 43rd one, you know. The Here's Johnny scene took 3 days to shoot, so just for the simple axe going into a door, I will stop because I will carry on for ages if I do. But Jordan, I absolutely love Doctor Sleep, and
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's terrible. I just don't think it's anywhere near this level, to be
No,
honest.
no.
I think the main criticism at the time for this film was Shelley Duvall's performance. I think at the time people thought she was too hysterical, maybe, but now with modern eyes, I think she's like Aiden says, her performance is perfect because it is her terror. She's just a simple girl, you know. It's just the terror of it. Sure, she was in Popeye's Olive Oil as well around the same time. Moving on, but no, it is just her terror is what sets the tone for the film, and I think without that, I don't know, maybe people were just too harsh back then. I know criticism was much more of an art form with Pauline Kael and people like back then. But no, I think it's just the best performance in a horror film ever by Jack Nicholson, and one of the best acting performances ever.
Easily. Well, Duvall and Kubrick and the movie itself were all nominated for Razzies, which is like the bad version of the Oscars. That's, you know, very self-aware into how they give their awards out to like the worst actor, the worst movie, the worst performance, and all that. You're looking back and you're like, what were they smoking over there in the 80s? You know, is unbelievable.
When we're talking about people who don't get nominated for Oscars in these films, like Toni Collette and Jack Nicholson, I feel like horror gets looked down a little bit by the Oscars sometimes. But,
Easily.
like Silence of the Lambs, they say it's a thriller now, but to me that's horror. To me, but and I'd just like to say on Shelley Duvall as well. At first I didn't like her in this film, but the more I watched it over time, the more I appreciate her performance. So
yeah,
I think when you've seen it a few times, you're sort of used to it, and then you can see it from a different angle, sort of, you know.
well,
anything else to say on? Go on, Abe, you want to say something?
I think if you go into this movie blind the first time you watch it, you've not got an inkling as to what's going to happen, especially the last bit in the maze. Because of how that maze has been constructed, you don't know if that kid's getting out of there. Jack Nicholson is ruthless in this movie. He's walking with his limp. He's moaning and groaning. You know, the Overlook itself is a character, in my opinion, because of everything that happens. You know, one of my favorite movie scenes of all time is when Jack Nicholson's in the bathroom talking to that ghost, and you know he's corrected her and all that. You know, I cannot praise this movie enough. And if I had the phone battery to talk about this for hours on end, I would. But you know, not a lot.
All right. Should we sort of end it there then? Because we've all picked them, haven't we? And this has gone on for 1 hour and 16 minutes. So if everyone is still watching, thank you very, very much for listening to us. I hope you all enjoyed it. There's so many films we could have mentioned. Like we were going to mention Misery and stuff, but we can only pick 4 each. You know what I mean? And there is so many. I could have picked 50 if I wanted. Like Aiden said, he could pick all. So. Sorry if we didn't mention your favourite film, guys, but if there is any that you think we should have mentioned, leave it down below. I will reply to every single one of you, I promise. Big thanks for coming on, lads. I mean, hopefully we can do it again, but hope you both enjoyed it.
I've loved it. I've loved it. If you welcome me back on, I would love to. I would love to talk about more horror movies or whatever.
Me and Andy will have a little chat.
Oh, his voice is a bit annoying.
I was going to say.
We'll definitely get you back on again. All right then, lads. Thanks very, very much for coming on. I hope you both enjoyed it. I hope everyone who's watching has enjoyed it. And stay tuned. We will have more collabs coming at some point in the future. But have a great Halloween. Enjoy whatever horror movies you watch, like myself, Halloween. But whatever you watch, please do enjoy it. Actually, you know what I'm watching tonight? The Nightmare Before Christmas. My fiance seems to think that you've got to watch this every day, every year by Halloween. So that's what I'm watching tonight. All right. Thanks very much. See you later, everyone. Take it easy.